Yo, what's up YouTube? It's your boy Bar Reacts. In today's video, I'm going to be showing y'all Jujutsu Kaisen Gojo vs Sukuna fully explained. Let's get straight to it.
I guess I need to kind of take everything back to the exact moment where the fight kicked off, and of course massive manga spoilers for anyone who's an anime only and happened to stumble across this fight. Anywho's, as all of these sorcerers were lacking out discussing how to give Gojo a boost of confidence, as it's the first time they've ever really needed to do so, Gojo himself, accompanied by Gramps and Utahime, all with looks of determination, then roll up and get ready for battle. With everyone around,
Yo, I cannot wait till this animated, bro. Y'all don't understand.
And lets him know that he can't even get close because his technique's in the way. Gojo is slightly surprised by this, but after a moment ends up laughing while telling his boy to give it to him, causing Yuji to jump up and slap his sensei on the back. Then, following on the same path, every other sorcerer patted Gojo on the back as he rolled through the group on his way to the battlefield. Walking through a skyscraper with Gojo now, Ajichi notes that it feels like ages since he was last here, yet in reality it's only been just over a month now. Wanting to know what the realm felt like, Gojo explains to him that the prison realm was like when you're mad busy with work that it flashes in a week. However, the feeling's so draining that you'd never want to experience it again. After a few moments, Gojo inquires about the people in the basement of Shibuya's metro station, where all of that chaos had started back in the Shibuya incident arc. If, we're being specific, that's where Gojo came across Choso, Hanami, and Joko, and they tried, teaming up on him and whatnot. Even though Gojo only fought them for a very short period of time, it left remnants of Gojo's cursed energy that made cursed spirits avoid the entire floor, which is actually insane when you think about it. This man is so strong, his residuals managed to scare off cursed spirits, which is, I still can't fathom it. I don't think anyone else is on this level. Ajichi also reveals that the people who were affected by a 0.2 second domain are all fine, and those who were affected return to normal. Walking it behind Gramps and Utahime now atop the roof, Gojo and Ajichi arrive as the Day of Reckoning has begun.
I get straight to the point, bro. I can't wait.
What time the fight is going to take place. To which Sukuna reveals that they didn't really specify a time, but as he says that, he's able to feel Gojo's aura emanating in his direction. Back in the hallway, and just moments before they made it up to the roof, Ajichi confronted Gojo on why he always wanted him to construct the barriers for him. Turning back and looking at his close friend, Gojo tells them that it's because he trusts him more than anyone else. Now, atop the roof and slamming his hands onto the ground in preparation for his barrier, Ajichi just thinks on how he's someone who's always fled. No, someone who didn't even have the courage to flee and was given the courage to run by a friend. Despite everything, Ajichi braces himself and knows that he must live up to Gojo's expectations, either that or die trying. In front of the two, and while using her curse technique called Solo Forbidden Arena, it's explained that any sorcerer of her choosing, including Utahime herself, will have their curse energy reserves and output temporarily enhanced as long as they remain within range. To excel at Jujutsu is to excel at subtraction. The degree to which a sorcerer can emit cadence, movement, and other elements that relate to their curse technique determines their skill, and Utahime leaves nothing out. Words, gestures, dance, music, elevating the simple technique to that of a ritual boosts its effectiveness by 120%. Utahime's curse technique allows her to boost the chosen sorcerer's curse energy, and as Gojo himself also began chanting to add to his own technique, 9 ropes, polarized light, crow, and declaration between front and back, it's revealed that just like our girl, Gojo has also never left anything out, and with the combination of the trio's curse energy, he shoots forth his 200% hollow purple. 200%. As Gojo's ability blasts forth, Sukuna manages to take notice of it and throws up his hands trying to block the entire attack. With the buildings all around him exploding due to hollow purple, Sukuna's defenses are undoubtedly breached as the building he was standing on is completely demolished, causing it to fall to the ground below. Urame, who was next to Sukuna at the time of the attack, has also not been seen since this moment. So correct me if I'm wrong on that or anything, but after this moment she's seemingly vanished from reality. So she's either gone or she sneaked off, managing to survive that attack, probably healing up somewhere. Either way, as the smoke slowly fades, it's made evident that due to Ajichi's barrier, Sukuna actually misread Gojo's first move. Even though he knew where he was, he didn't sense the insane curse energy output until the last moment. Bursting through the smoke, Sukuna.
Whoever narrated this, W for this video, cause this is very well explained, bro.
With one less hand, somehow managed to tank the first attack, leaving the true battle between history and today's strongest sorcerers to continue. So, skipping back just before the blast, Sukuna and Ryomen were located at the Shinjuku Center, which is around 4 to 5 kilometers away from the Shibuya building Gojo was currently on with his team.
From that
Having
far?
Stroll probably just teleported across that distance in a matter of moments, Gojo sets the record straight and tells the King of Curses that he's the challenger here. The challenger though, Sukuna standing there finds it utterly pathetic that Gojo would state that after landing a surprise attack. In his eyes, and as he brings his hands together, Gojo is no more than a fish atop his chopping board, one slightly fresher, but still a nameless fish. Flaring up his curse energy, Sukuna just remarked that it's time he starts peeling back Gojo's scales. Gojo asks him why he's still wearing that face, and guesses that Sukuna's original thought was to steal Megumi's body so he'd hold back during the fight. Unfortunately for him, our man's been through a specific set of training that allows him to go all out on anyone who resembles any sort of resemblance to the great Toji Fushiguro. Considering that Gojo himself trained Megumi, he probably knows exactly how many hits his student could take before he dies. And given that Sukuna had survived death while possessing Yuji's body, Gojo thought it would be prudent to only start worrying about Megumi's welfare after he kills the person in control. Initiating the conflict, the duo dart at each other, both just narrowly dodging each successive strike. Dropping to the floor just out of range of Sukuna, Gojo flicks out his hand straight into his opponent's nuts, sending them shooting into the side of a nearby building, and out the other side crashing into some stairs behind it. Getting up, he's instantly harassed by Gojo, who, stomping in his direction, proceeds to kick him in the gut so he's perfectly placed in the middle of an overpass bridge platform. Continuing to stomp down, Gojo collapses the platform Sukuna was on, making his footing extremely unstable. Taking the opportunity to catch him off guard, Gojo activates his infinity and levitates the bridge into the sky, before tossing it directly at a large skyscraper. Resisting the force of the platform, Sukuna uses Dismantle, or what I assume to be Dismantle, to cause the structure to collapse. Then, making it over to a nearby roof in the flash of an eye, Sukuna pulls up his hand and sends a massive slice using Dismantle to cut the building directly behind Gojo in half. With our man turning around to look at it, Sukuna quickly rushes him, throwing a fat right hook that catches Gojo off guard. However, as the punch connects with his infinity, he decides to deactivate his technique in order to physically take Sukuna inside of the collapsing structure. Following him up the hallway, Gojo quickly opens a door for a moment that blinds the two from seeing exactly what ability they're about to throw at each other. Catching them both off guard though, the building crashes into the ground below, bringing a previously intense fight to a brief pause. Walking out of the debris while all of the smoke slowly starts to disperse, Gojo jokes that, well, he's just gonna pin all of this destruction on Sukuna once he gets out of here.
Bro.
Sukuna though
when
points
this get
out
animated,
really
bro,
can't say
oh my
anything,
goodness.
quickly making Gojo realize that Mei's actually streaming this entire fight to the world. When it comes down to Gojo's limitless technique, it allows him to be completely untouchable. To get around this, and in a similar way to what Hanami and Jogo did, Sukuna is using domain amplification to neutralize his curse technique. Confused slightly on what domain amplification is, Yuta explains to everyone while they watch the fight that he saw something similar in Mikomaru's footage. He pretty much said like what I exactly said before about Jogo and Hanami using domain amplification to nullify like Gojo's technique and everything. Hikari points out that it does seem like Gojo's domain has been neutralized, but he's still confused how. The old G, Kusakabe, lets them all know that it's more of a refined version of a simple domain. If one sheaths themselves in a domain without imbuing your own curse technique, you allow the opponent's technique to flow into that empty space, thereby neutralizing it. Angel points out that the main drawback to domain amplifications is that you can't simultaneously use your own innate technique. No one, not even Sukuna, is an exception to this rule. So, in her eyes, if Sukuna has another way to deal with Limitless other than Domain Amp, then Gojo will 100% lose. Confused on why they don't just use the domain expansion, Miba inquires as to why. She knows that immediately following the domain, one's technique becomes unstable. So, it would make sense for Sukuna to challenge a domain first. Karara notes that it is easy to say that, but depending on the outcome of that domain battle, the fight would be over, which in both of the girls' eyes is the correct battle strategy. Yuji though, having been told something by Gojo, reveals that he's pretty sure the domain's short hit effect negates Gojo's technique to begin with. Perking up, Wee wonders if it's because Sukuna doesn't think he can win in a domain expansion against Gojo. Still, Shoko points out that, yeah, you are right, but Gojo probably would have opened one if that was the case, so she finds it hard to believe that Gojo wouldn't be able to foresee that as well. Standing there, Choso ponders the question of what would happen if Gojo's domain did clash, as from what he was told, Sukuna's domain is a barrierless domain. Hearing this bizarre statement,
they gotta make this a movie
shock,
bro.
Unable to believe that his domain doesn't even have a barrier. As an example of like just how impossible this is, Kusakabe asks Miwa to toss him that water. However, after she gives him the bottle, he throws it back, telling her to give him the water, not the bottle. Confused, Miwa just facials the absolute hell out of Kusakabe, while in behind them, Mei-san explains that expanding a domain without a barrier is like trying to hold water without a bottle. With no container, can you even accumulate water? Can you paint on thin air without a canvas? With no stem, root or leaves, can a flower bloom from a seed? Maki compares it to using software without even having a PC to run anything on. It's frankly unfathomable in their eyes. It's completely impossible. Even
totally
still,
different
she
now.
knows that Megumi's domain was never enclosed within a
sister.
barrier. And having heard that before Megumi was given his grade promotion, Kusakabe explained that to use it, he actually had to use an existing structure to enclose his domain. Narutoshi Keimo, or like as we know him now, Gojo Kinjaku, was able to pull it off by himself, so it does prove that it can happen. Choso, who actually fought during that battle, pointed out that they'd prepared to use a simple domain on Kenjaku while Tengen dismantled his domain from the outside. However, because of the barrierless domain, it was the simple domain that was torn apart. Miwa, who's confused over what exactly would clash in this attack, states that the short effect is imbued within the barrier itself, so it can only clash with
no glaze though, because I love Dragon Ball. I feel like this fight is gonna be behind Goku versus Jiren, bro. I'm telling you. I am telling you, because they're gonna make a movie out of this. I'm telling you. They're gonna make a movie.
Barrier. She also realizes that, well, everyone's talking as if their domains are a given, but domains devour an insane amount of curse energy, so wouldn't avoiding using them make sense? Inumaki speaks up and notes that, well, it doesn't really matter since Gojo has an infinite amount of curse energy. Ino knows that fact isn't actually true, and it's just due to how he's skilled at using his specific technique. If his curse energy consumption rate ends up being less than what he actually replenishes, then it could technically run out. That's just working under the assumption though that he's using it like normal. If he changes things up and starts using domains consecutively, then that could be a completely different story. Not having even mentioned what Sukuna is actually capable of as well in fighting, Kashimo speaks up to state that the sharpness of his technique's activation is unparalleled. The way he can switch things up in a matter of milliseconds from innate techniques to domain amplifications is utterly amazing. If Gojo literally wasn't who he is, then Sukuna would comfortably be winning in terms of curse energy utilization. What's more, his total curse energy output is probably even more than Yuta's. From what he can physically tell, he'd say it's probably double the amount that he actually has. Momo, who's been pretty quiet this entire chat, speaks up and feels that maybe nobody, not even them, knows how this is going to play out. If Gojo and Sukuna's domains do clash, who knows what could possibly happen? Then, right on that exact moment, and after all of this insane build-up that we just went through, Higuruma signaled that they are about to begin the domain clashes. Back in Shinjuku, both Sukuna and Gojo throw up their respective hand signs to simultaneously
look at the panel, let's get animated. Oh my goodness.
With Sukuna now appearing above his shrine and Gojo standing a few feet back, it's explained that the two are evenly matched. They form a perfect pair within Gojo's barrier, which in turn meant that both guaranteed hits overlapped each other, then cancelled themselves out. In this battle, and as the two expand their domains, should either one of them sustain severe damage, it will cause the collapse of their domain, and the other one's sure hits will immediately take effect. Back at the TV room, Kusakabe and Mei both react in shock, as somehow, even with their domains active, they're still evenly matched. In Shinjuku, the pure force of the two overlapping domains caused the surrounding area to start getting atomized. Sadly for Gojo, the effective range of Sukuna's domain reaches even beyond that of a barrier. And just as Yuji notes that a domain expansion is weak from the outside, Gojo's domain cracks and shatters as it's shown that below it, Sukuna's domain now sits perfectly fine. With no protection against Sukuna's sure hit technique, the effect immediately flies forth and seemingly cuts down the strongest sorcerer of today.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Having taken the slash to the neck, Gojo nonchalantly activates his reverse curse technique, which everyone back at the lair reacts to. Higuruma states that as long as Gojo stays in range, the slashes will never stop coming. Choso, who assumes escaping is probably the port of call for Gojo, is backed up by Hikari, who somewhat agreed with him. However, it's more that Hikari assumes Gojo will make a dash for the exit, whereas Kusakabe realizes that teleporting is out of the question, since it's an application of the limitless technique. Due to the use of his domain expansion and it being destroyed, it's plausible that for a moment he can't use his curse technique, which, like they state, means he's in store for one hell of a beatdown. Back inside of Sukuna's domain expansion, Gojo is relentlessly slashed over and over again by the sure hit effect of the domain. Somehow though, Gojo manages to calm himself as he knows for a fact that when it comes down to techniques, Limitless is far better. Having been able to consistently overpower Sukuna's short-hit effect with his use of reverse curse
Yo, when it's
technique,
getting
Gojo,
animated,
just like what
like,
everyone else had
gonna be
expected,
so
makes a
tough.
dash for the exit. Sukuna immediately makes a dash to keep up with him, while remarking that he isn't going to just let him escape. Grabbing his leg though, Gojo, still while constantly getting slashed, pulls him in and knees Sukuna into the floor. Towering over him, Gojo attempts to land a curse energy infused overhand, but misses, only cracking the floor as Sukuna manages to
He's
quickly
just
weasel
tanking his
way
malevolent
out.
shrine,
Standing
bro.
there and looking at his opponent, Sukuna remarks that Gojo's still moving pretty well, considering that he's been activating his reverse curse technique at full output in order to survive the constant slashing. Gojo, on the other hand, notices something extremely important. To him, it looks like Malevolent Shrine itself is the heart of the domain, not Sukuna. Back inside of the headquarters, Yuji ponders what would happen if someone did destroy the heart of the domain, or like the shrine specifically. The Big Brain Kusakabe brings up that objects inside of domains don't tend to hold any special meaning or significance, so think of it as like it wasn't even there to begin with. Mei-san thinks that if it is a symbol of the domain, then you wouldn't even be able to destroy it, and even considering Gojo's insane skills, it doesn't look like he's taken any measures to actually try to destroy it. Suddenly, Gojo activates the new Shadow style, Simple Domain, taking Kusakabe by surprise, as he probably didn't expect to see this one. Yuji though noting that Gojo said one time he could use it, but wasn't able to actually teach it. During the battle, he was able to use his Simple Domain to counter the sure hit effect while simultaneously using Reverse Curse technique to heal its body. Confused, Yuji wonders how one even manipulates their own curse energy while Reverse Curse technique is active. Again, Gojo activates another use of the Simple Domain before darting at Sukuna and attempting to strike him. In an instant, he's once again pounded by the sure hit effect, layering Gojo with a plethora of cuts though. Again, he activates another use of Simple Domain and Reverse Curse technique, causing Sukuna to call this all a little bit tedious right now. Randomly though, everyone back at the headquarters is taken by surprise when they see Gojo start attacking Sukuna once more without using Reverse Curse technique to heal himself. Someone wonders if he's running low on curse energy, but Yuta refutes this as it's frankly impossible. There's no limit to Gojo's curse energy, even though there totally is. Speaking up though, Eno mentions that, like he said before, the assumption rate could currently be off. Right after domain expansion, he started using reverse curse technique at maximum output, which uses up twice as much curse energy, and that's not even taking into account the fact that Sukuna is also rushing at Gojo himself. With the two powerhouses of the series also rushing at each other once again, and the cuts not stopping for Gojo, everyone wonders if Gojo is about to lose. Jumping on Sukuna though and wrapping his hands around the back of his head, Gojo activates his curse technique reversal before leaning back and pulling his hands up in preparation to end the fight. Blown away with what he's just witnessed, he wonders if it's even possible. In his mind, the reason he wasn't able to heal himself for a moment was because Gojo was using reverse curse technique to heal his exhausted curse technique. Unleashing Red, Gojo shoots forth a blast of reverse curse technique, propelling Sukuna back into the shrine that makes up the center of his domain. Noting that he somehow managed to survive the blast, Gojo activates reverse curse technique to heal.
This panel is so fire,
this
bro.
dude is really turning into a pain on the ass.
He's playing,
Going into more depth
bro.
on the insane feat Gojo just did, Yuta explains that a curse technique which has been burned out by using domain expansion is an entirely different matter than physical damage. It's like when a machine overheats, if it isn't broken, you have to let it cool down or it won't work again. Interpreting this, Maki makes it easier to understand by saying that reverse curse technique can repair damage, but it can't help with the cooling effects of it. However, it looks as if this understanding of the ability is completely wrong. Back in Shinjuku, and having made it out of the effective range, Gojo asks if Sukuna is able to expand the size of his area. Not even giving Gojo a second to think, Sukuna instantly expands the size of Malevolent Shrine's domain expansion to its maximum. In the same moment, Gojo, to the shock of everyone, also expanded his infinite void for a second time. With everyone watching, they wonder if Gojo's really dumb enough to just fall into the same trap as before.
The artist is crazy.
May notices it first though, and Higuruma, who, by the way, for a new sorcerer, is so big brain, states that Gojo switched conditions on the external and internal conditions of his barrier, which, in simple enough terms for myself and Yuji to understand, means that Gojo this time is able to protect himself against the attacks from outside of his domain. Reinitiating the battle once more, both Gojo and Sukuna trade hands back and forth, but not once do the hits actually end up landing on either side. Jumping back, Gojo is absolutely blown away as he understands that somehow Sukuna was able to use his domain expansion and amplification at the exact same time. On top of that, he's becoming more comfortable inside of his own infinite void, and his curse energy output is only increasing. So, in usual Jujutsu Kaisen combat, you cannot use an innate technique that is etched into your body while using a domain amp. But if you go and imbue your domain with a technique itself, then this is an entirely new situation. Throwing a punch, Sukuna manages to dodge back out of the way. However, as he pushes, trying to strike Gojo, the Six-Eyes Maniac manages to evade the strike and thump the side of Sukuna's body. Managing to spin out of Gojo's sight, he quickly understands that somehow, and while inside of his own domain, Sukuna turned off his sure hit effect. Knowing that the only ones who are unaffected by Infinite Void are Gojo and anyone he touches, Sukuna's plan is to expand his effective range and increase the power of the Binding Vow even further than he did in Shibuya with Megami. By using the Binding Vow, Sukuna is able to further increase the power of his domain outside of Gojo's domain. He does that by removing his sure hit guarantee inside of the domain, while simultaneously also keeping himself safe from Infinite Void by touching Gojo. Due to all of this, and again just like last time, Gojo's domain collapses and the man is followed by a plethora of strikes that seemingly knock him away from Sukuna. With everyone back at the TV station headquarters place, whatever it honestly is, I don't have a clue what to even call it, react in horror to what's going on in the current battle, Hajime states that if Gojo dies here, he's going out to fight next, so don't even try and stop him. Over in Shinjuku, Gojo activates another technique that he notes he hasn't used much since he mastered his domain. Seeing this, Kusakabe spits out a smoke in awe of just having seen Gojo use the Falling Blossom emotion. For those of you who forgot, because I think it's only been used like maybe 2 or 3 times throughout the series, it's a secret art of the big 3 families, an anti-domain technique. All in all, it's an application of curse energy that automatically repels anything you touch. It wouldn't ever be able to do something against the complex domain like Infinite Void, but if you're up against something like simple slashes, it's pretty useful. Jumping in, Shoko says that he most likely used it so he can heal his burned out curse technique, or at the least buy some time. Again though, like what is this, the 3rd time now? Gojo blows them all away as he activates another use of Infinite Void. Unlike all of the previous uses though, this time it's completely massive in comparison, and in Kishimo's eyes, it looks as if Gojo was trying to encapsulate all of Sukuna's domain within his own barrier. Mei thinks that it's a bad move trying to expand a domain to that size, as it'll drastically lower its effectiveness, and like Higuruma states, even if the domain isn't destroyed, it's still pointless unless he wins the battle inside of it. Suddenly, Gojo's domain cracks, putting everyone on edge and making them think that it's about to fail. Momo though quickly speaks up that no, it's not broken, in fact the barrier is quickly changing size and now it's only a fraction of the original size. With Gojo's domain only like the size of a basketball now, Kusakabe remarked that this is frankly impossible, causing Mei to joke about how many times they've said these words today.
It's that box he was in, bro.
Its outward appearance, and if the inside is that of a similar size. Kusakabe agrees with her, as that's why when you're usually trapped inside one, you can't get out unless you find the edge of the barrier. Even if you find that edge, a normal domain is resistant to attacks from the outside, so escape is still extremely limited. What's most important when it comes to a barrier technique is a concrete image. Usually, if you try and envision a barrier too small enough to hold yourself and an opponent, it would just collapse. Just like the prison round though, and probably due to his time being confined in a small space there, it's now allowing Gojo to take that and implement it into his domain during the battle. Still, Kusakabe can't grasp the process around how he's able to change the conditions of his domain each time he uses it. Barriers, particularly domain barriers, typically have a set of internal and external parameters. By discovering their own blend of these parameters, every sorcerer is able to establish their own domain. Confused and piping their heads up, as obviously this wasn't how Higuruma and Hikari figured out their domains, like they open their domains by default as a part of their curse technique. In any case, they aren't usually things that can be changed easily. Kusakabe ponders if he changed the size of his domain because it was too difficult to maintain the larger surface mass, so he had to compress it to make things easier, or maybe it was because he wanted to see if he could cover all of the Malevolent Shrine with an even larger barrier. With Gojo's domain beginning to shake back and forth at such a tremendous speed, the earth itself begins to rumble. Mei points out that even still, Gojo's domain has managed to hold, and Yuta states that Sukuna has also decreased his domain so he could increase the output of his curse technique. So pretty much now, if this version of Gojo's barrier does end up breaking, they'll enter a stalemate. However, Gojo will actually end up being on the back foot as he will run out of options technique-wise. Flashing back over to Shinjuku, sadly, once more, Gojo's domain is again shattered, and Sukuna emerges victorious for a 3rd time in a domain struggle. It's either the 3rd or the 4th now, I'm honestly losing track throughout the script here. Having watched his sensei reappear, Yuji screams out for him. However, In that moment, all of the other sorcerers are flabbergasted as they witness Sukuna's malevolent shrine start to crumble and fall to pieces. On top of that, it's shown that at some point throughout the domain struggle, Gojo was able to land a clean blow to the chest of Sukuna, causing the King of Curses to finally take some proper damage. Seeing this over their monitors, all of these sorcerers scream in joy, believing that Gojo still has a chance to win in this battle. Funnily enough, it was actually simultaneous. At the exact same time Sukuna destroyed Gojo's domain from the outside, Gojo had actually destroyed Sukuna's domain to the point that he wasn't able to maintain it any longer. Yelling at Miwa, Kusakabe asks if she was able to keep track of what was going on in this fight, or if anyone kept track of the time that Gojo's barrier was active. Speaking up, Mei reveals that it was active for 3 minutes and 9 seconds, but if it was more specifically after the moment that it was minimized, then that was exactly 3 minutes. Higuruma believes that now the domains have collapsed, neither of them will be able to use their curse techniques anymore. If that is the case, Maki thinks Gojo can make the first move, since he can restore his burnt out curse technique just like he did before. But sadly, Sukuna can also do the same with reverse curse technique, and speaking of himself, now that he knows how it works, Yuta theorizes that he could probably do it too, though, like he mentioned earlier, it can't be used to heal a burnt out curse technique, but it actually can. He's just tripping right now. The reasoning that Gojo actually showing this to Sukuna is a terrible problem for everyone is because, back in the past, Sukuna was able to split his spirit 20 times into 20 different objects called Sukuna's cursed fingers. After seeing this ability just once in the past, Sukuna learned how to turn himself into a cursed object, and now that he's seen this new ability, it's most likely he'll also be able to restore his burnt out curse technique.
You're still gonna see a curse once
Sukuna boosts his way up onto a bridge, giving a moment of peace before noticing that random parts of the road start to get smashed up from below. Quickly jumping off the bridge and onto some railing nearby, Sukuna notices Gojo break his way up through the bridge behind him. Then, turning back around, realizes that his escape route was blocked by a ball of rocks that Gojo had perfectly floated there using his infinity.
Yeah, that's crazy.
With absolutely nowhere to go, Sukuna throws up his hands to block and takes a kick that sends him sliding back along the sidewalk. Taking a moment to think about the fight, Gojo wonders why Sukuna has been stubbornly avoiding using any other curse technique than his own. Even when the strength of the barrier was lowered and Gojo had flipped the conditions on it, he didn't try to destroy it from the inside. Instead, he took the riskier option. While they cancelled out each other's sure hit effects from within the domain, Sukuna had no other choice but to use his domain amplification in order to beat his limitless curse technique, which was actually a massive advantage for our man. Still, as he saw earlier, within a domain, Sukuna is unable to use buildings to attack. In fact, until after Gojo's domain was destroyed, he technically had the upper hand for over 3 minutes. Yet, in spite of that, he can't seem to understand why Sukuna didn't ever attempt to make use of something from the 10 Shadows technique or Maharaga while in a domain. He has the memory of Megumi and the conversation that happened between them, so he knows for a fact that someone of the exact same power died to a person like Megumi. Gojo just ponders if he's scared he'll beat Maharaga in one shot. However, in that exact same moment, the wheel turns and blood begins to drip from his own nose. Fucking nosebleed though, Gojo was baiting our damn ass with that one, and in an instant, both him and Sukuna throw up their hands to perform another domain clash. Yuji points out that again they activated it at the exact same time, and Angel, who's right next to him, brings up that Sukuna can now restore his burnt out curse technique, or maybe just decided to hide the fact that he could until now. Kusakabe knows that within the next 3 minutes that it should take Sukuna to destroy Gojo's domain from the outside. Gojo will need to damage Sukuna to the point he can't maintain his domain from the inside. Shoko, joking that they probably shouldn't talk as if Gojo was on the back foot yet, brings up that if Sukuna is hit at all by Unlimited Void, then man is completely done for. Due to this, it's certain that if Gojo is able to destroy the Malevolent Shrine within the next 3 minutes, then he will win this battle. Inside of Shinjuku, and having flared up his curse energy fists, Gojo pounds Sukuna with a barrage of punches that really only bruise the King of Curse's arms. Jumping up, Sukuna tries to quickly get over his shrine, however, he's knocked into the floor, then, while incapacitated, is grabbed by Gojo's infinity and pulled towards himself. Having been flung towards Gojo, Sukuna just manages to block a devastating stomach punch. Randomly though, and I'm assuming man's used Yuji's Divergent Punch to delay the hit of his curse energy, Sukuna's Malevolent Shrine is completely destroyed, while in the exact same moment, Gojo's domain also ends. Falling to the ground and looking up, it's evident that this time, Sukuna took a serious blow, as half of his face appears to be missing. With everyone believing that when it comes down to domain struggles, Gojo is stronger, they all hope deep within themselves that he can win. Back in the battle and throwing a fat right hook, Gojo sends Sukuna straight back into the side of a bridge pillar, breaking it in the process. I don't even know what we're at now, like this is utterly insane. And in that moment, Gojo and Sukuna launch another set of domain struggles.
Domain
Yet,
expansion,
unlike
bro.
all of the previous battles, something is actually different here for the first time, and Yuta can't help but feel like maybe, just maybe, Gojo was able to expand his domain earlier. Inside of the domain struggle, it is revealed that Sukuna was indeed busy healing his body, and because of that, he was late restoring his curse technique. It was less than 0.01 seconds, but unlimited void landed on him. As an infinite set of infinite information rushes into the cerebral cortex of history's strongest sorcerer, and
like
the king
his
of
domain
curses,
is so
Our
OP.
Man, today's current demon,
Look at
rushes
that.
forth and pierces the chest of darkness incarnate.
Literally
Only 2
freezing his
minutes
brain.
and 40 seconds after they expanded their domains, Gojo was able to collapse malevolent shrine within his innate compound. With nothing, not even the friction in the air available for Sukuna to use now, he stands there dumbfounded as the full effects of Satoru Gojo's infinite void connects with his brain. Not done yet himself, Gojo lets everyone know that crushing his heart was only the beginning. Now, he's gonna take everything from him. However, before he's able to even connect with Sukuna, a set of prolific words are spoken. With this treasure I summon, 8-handled, sword divergent, Scylla divine,
Maharaga
general,
aura. Look at that.
Maharaga.
Look how big he
Skitsing
is.
out with the fact that, like, Sukuna managed to summon him in that moment, Gojo just assumes that it hasn't had time to adapt to unlimited void yet, so surely he can destroy it in one shot. Activating curse technique reversal, Gojo is just baffled when he witnesses Maharaga literally not care, and instead with his sword of extermination slashes down, completely
That's
destroying
crazy.
Gojo's infinite void. Falling to the ground now, Gojo can only gasp as he realizes that somehow Maharaga had already adapted to his domain expansion, allowing him to freely attack from the inside. Realizing that Maharaga had been
adapted that
summoned,
fast,
Gojo
like
points out
how?
that it has the ability to adapt to any attack, even unlimited void. Using reverse curse technique, and with Maharaga by his side, Sukuna knows that Gojo was well aware of the Shikigami's abilities. In the battles so far, both of the guys have had their domains cancel each other's out a total of 5 times. Gojo's sure hit effect targeted everything within their domain, whereas Sukuna's sure hit effect targeted everything inside the domain with the exception of himself. This means that the sure hit effect targeting Sukuna was still in place. Crazily enough, one of the duo was able to take on unlimited void a total of 5 times while shouldering the burden of Maharaga's adaptation. This person wasn't Sukuna though. No, it was someone else entirely. Blown away with the revelation, Gojo quickly figures that somehow he managed to adapt to unlimited void within 0.01 seconds of his domain opening. Doing
That's
some more
crazy.
crazy deductions, he figures that, like I said, somehow Sukuna overcame the burden of Maharaga's adaptation ability. Then realizing he's wrong, states that the one actually taking the damage was Megami's soul. Deep inside the
Wow.
conscious of Megami's mind, we see him
Look how
barely
depressed he
awake
is.
with Maharaga's wheel floating directly above him. Seeing Gojo now and wondering what's on his mind, Sukuna asks, "What's up?" To which Gojo says, "Nothing really. It just warms his heart to see him using such fraudulent abilities." Replying to his underhanded diss, Sukuna states that Unlimited Void is an ability that Gojo activated once inside of his domain. He originally expected it to be a pain in the ass trying to figure out this technique, and at the start of the fight he had planned to neutralize it first. So, while unable to use amplification within the domain, Sukuna used Megami's soul to adapt to Unlimited Void using his own Ten Shadows technique. As a result, he wasn't able to use anything other than what was originally imbued into his own domain. Knowing that all Megami took then was the process of adaptation, not like the full effect of Infinite Void itself, Gojo begins pulling up his hand and remarking that Sukuna hasn't actually adapted Megami's soul itself to Unlimited Void, and if he opens his domain once more, he'll destroy him in one attack. Not phased over this though, Sukuna kinda just laughs and taunts Gojo while telling him that he's no longer able to open his domain. Instantly, and as he tries activating it once more, blood begins streaming from his nose, and everyone back at headquarters still watching the monitors begins freaking out over the possible outcomes. By the way, who do you guys think has left from the headquarters? Like, we can see a few people are still there from like flashing around between now and like what's released. I have a few thoughts in mind, like, well, where's Takaba? I haven't seen him since the start of their conversation, I'm pretty sure. Back at like 220 something. Anyway, getting back to the story. Having found her way in now, Sukuna remarks that using reverse curse technique to heal his exhausted innate technique looks to have strained his physical brain quite a bit. To him, it's evident that his brain, more specifically the prefrontal cortex where the information on curse techniques is located, has been destroyed and repaired far too many times using reverse curse technique to heal his burnt out curse technique now. Oh my god, man, the amount of times I have said
Pretty
curse
smart.
technique, reverse curse technique throughout this video, like, I am so confused, and I've probably messed it up like once or twice. I probably have. Anyway. Terrified at the fact that Gojo had been using such a wild technique, Yusuke just screams that this is way too risky. They all know that the brain, especially that section of the brain, is the most important, and you can't even compare it to simply repairing someone's normal bodily damage. Shoko speaks up, nervous over the fact that she kind of assumed by now that Gojo had gotten used to this effect on his brain. However, it looks like he's beginning to suffer. On top of that, Sukuna has actually done it fewer times, so he's in a much healthier battle condition. Back in Shinjuku, and as Gojo drops to one knee, Sukuna states that Gojo has reached his limits. Even if he could have expanded his domain again, he would have lost the instant that he did. Not to mention the fact that he wouldn't even be able to make it precise enough to actually be a threat to Sukuna. Taunting him like the demon he truly is, Sukuna lets Gojo know that next up, he'll bring the circumference of his domain inwards. From there, he'll be left with nowhere to run, and as he carves him up, he'll simultaneously adapt to his infinity. Saying his final goodbyes, he states that Gojo was born into an era without Sukuna, and was hailed as the strongest of that era. Yet, in the end, he just turned out to be plainfully ordinary.
Like, imagine it ended like
Saying
this.
those
That would have been
prolific
crazy.
words, domain expansion, one last time, Sukuna proceeds to unleash his domain. However, in that exact moment, all of his eyes begin bleeding profusely, and the domain fails. So, crazily enough, from the time of the previous domains, this last conversation had happened in 10 seconds. And yet, just like Gojo, Sukuna's brain had sustained enough damage to now make an expansion impossible. Jumping up and laughing at Sukuna after seeing this, Gojo just notes that it looks like it's hitting him pretty hard now. Then pointing at Mei's crows, he knows that all of his students are watching him put his life on the line, so he's gonna go ahead and keep showing off for them. Jumping forth with a speed that Sukuna is unable to keep up with, Gojo throws a fat right hook to let his opponent know that he still has a long way to go to defeat him. Over inside of the main group's hideout, Kusakabe asks who there had been seriously punched by Gojo before. A few people speak up, noting that, well, he didn't hit them, but they tried their best to punch him as hard as they could, and it was physically impossible. Due to only like a few people taking a hit though, Kusakabe, who I'm assuming has as well, says that his fists are enhanced with curse energy, and on the moment of impact, blue repeatedly absorbs the surrounding space. It feels as if you're being counterattacked after preparing for a regular blow. Karara wonders if it hurt, and Hikari along with Yuta both reveal that they puked after the hit they took. Naomi once told Yuji that if he planned on continuing as a sorcerer, then he shouldn't compare himself to Gojo. He stated that he put a massive deal of effort behind his critical hits, but Gojo could casually perform them as if it was an everyday thing. Putting them all back on track though, and what Kusakabe was mainly trying to explain, was that from here on out, when it comes to straight hands, he doesn't have a clue what Gojo is doing. Back in Shinjuku, it's shown that Gojo is completely dominating Sukuna in a physical fight.
Goodness.
He boosts down a building while smashing Sukuna into every level, before turning around and tossing him over the road. When Sukuna lands, Gojo uses all of the rubble that had previously broken away from the building to entrap the King of Curses inside a brick coffin. Exploding out of the reinforced brick, Sukuna darts forth and quickly ducks a head kick from Gojo. Getting caught under his trap though, Gojo slams his leg down, only to see Sukuna flip out of the way and prepare his own axe kick. All of a sudden he stops though, as he sees what seems like Gojo running at such a high speed it's begun creating a circle of after images. Thinking that he has the upper hand now, Gojo darts into strike, but Sukuna manages to spot the real image and grab his hand before following up and punching him straight in the face. Being sent backwards, Gojo quickly regains his orientation and lands atop a nearby streetlight. Walking towards him, Sukuna explains that Furu's incarnation, used to manifest Maharaga along with the wheel, represents complete circulation and harmony. Once Maharaga has been attacked, the wheel turns and the adaptation begins. With that said, the wheel turns and Maharaga seemingly adapts.
He's
Gojo knows
adapting
that
to every
when Sukuna uses domain
all his
amplification
curse
and touches him,
techniques,
the
bruh.
wheel turns black. So
Not
it's safe to
fair.
assume then, in his eyes, that it interrupts the adaptation process.
Gojo had to
Sukuna
go though. I
can't
ain't gonna
activate his
lie,
domain,
bro.
but can use
Hey, look at him.
amplification.
Like
That's
like
probably
he's
because
he's
the area
tweaking.
of his brain
He's tweaking
originally
out,
damaged
bro.
was in charge of barrier techniques. Over with Sukuna now, as he slowly strolls forth, he thinks that Gojo is most likely only using laps to avoid having his other techniques adapted, which makes perfect sense in his eyes. As the lights then go green, the two of them rush at each other once more, clashing in the middle of the road. With the light Gojo was just on falling behind Sukuna, he quickly grabs it and biffs it towards Gojo. However, it freezes as the object connects with his infinity. Back over with the main group now,
Yes,
as they all
horrible,
note
like,
that its random
how did
Maharaga
you
hasn't
stop that?
reappeared, may suppose that it had already adapted once Unlimited Void was used for a 5th time. Taking that knowledge in, Kari deduces that maybe the wheel has to turn a few times in order for Sukuna to adapt to Gojo's limitless technique. Then, just like they assumed, and as Sukuna asked if Gojo had been paying attention to his ability, Owlman explains that he needs 4 spins in total, which technically means only 3 more spins of the wheel until Maharaga fully adapts to Gojo's infinity. Walking towards each other again, Sukuna jokes that they now have a countdown to when Gojo's idiotic smirk will be wiped from his face, causing our Go to smile right back and tell him the same damn thing. In fact, Gojo takes it one step further, saying that he'll beat him dead before he even makes it to the 3rd spin. Still eagerly watching the battle, Hana questions if Gojo's forgotten about Megumi, to which Yuji says that man might really have. Hearing them and looking ready to throw some hands himself, Kashimo jokes that it's fine, let him forget Megumi. Needing to forget Megumi because man's in a slightly tight spot right now, Yuji watches as Maharaga's wheel spins for the 2nd time, meaning that there's only 2 more spins until Gojo's infinity will be fully adapted to. Turning his hands into perfectly constructed orbs of blue curse energy, Gojo flings them at Sukuna, making him acrobatically flip out of the way as the ability burns the bridge from existence. Capturing Sukuna within his range, Gojo sticks both of his hands forth and creates more cursed energy orbs that circle his target, leaving them with nowhere to escape. Somehow escaping though, Sukuna manages to duck down before darting off, causing all of the orbs to immediately change direction and start tracking his new position. Boosting it around one of the nearby pillars, Gojo flies up and quickly blocks Sukuna's kick. Having gained the advantage now, he follows up by kicking his opponent down towards the road below. While falling, the wheel spins for the 3rd time, making everyone back at the TV room get more and more nervous over the impending adaptation. Yuji curiously wonders if it's time that's needed for the wheel to adapt, or if it was battle experience. Realizing what Yuji was trying to say, Kusakabe solidifies his question by also pondering if A. Does it take one attack, then time for the wheel to understand, then adapt, or B. Is it adapting after taking multiple blows? Still not even sure himself, he points out that Gojo hasn't used anything other than laps, so he doesn't even know, and compounding that, Kashimo states that either option is actually possible. That's the reality of the situation. Following the King of Curses through one of the nearby building's windows, Gojo remarks that from now on, he's gonna give him hell. In his eyes, he's convinced Sukuna that all he's using is blue, so with this timing, he won't be able to react. Pulling up his hand and firing a point-blank shot of Curse Technique Reversal Red, Gojo just watches as the wheel turns black, signifying that Sukuna had activated his domain amplification. As the technique hit, and because of what I previously just mentioned, Sukuna was just barely able to minimize the damage in time. Activating his reverse curse technique to heal, Sukuna thinks that he expected this. Even if amplification can neutralize the low output of Limitless, it can't fully cancel out blue or the reversed red. Yuji and Kusakabe both react in abject horror as they realize that at this rate, Sukuna will fully adapt to his technique. Looking heavily beaten and bruised, Sukuna turns around to remark that Gojo is sloppy, and questions if the greatest sorcerer of today had lost his cool once his hand was red. Randomly though, Gojo doesn't attack, and instead, he just tells his opponent that, you know, like the red he shot back before? Well, it hasn't actually exploded yet. Suddenly, taking one of the hardest back shots in the figurative world that is Jujutsu Kaisen, Sukuna gasps in pain as he realizes that the King of Curses was taken from behind. Quickly calculating the building's layout, he figures that Gojo must have planned from the start to have red strike after one full lap. Not giving him a chance to recover, Gojo follows up and pounds Sukuna so damn hard with a black flash that physically knocks Sukuna out for a moment.
Him out.
Everyone back at the TV room just watches in awe as they never expected such an ability
Look at
to
that.
land.
Ooh, knocked his ass out. Eyes went white.
Back in Shinjuku, blood pours from Sukuna's mouth and the wheel falls, symbolizing the defeat of history's strongest sorcerer. Randomly though, the wheel picks up speed and spins for the final time, while at the exact same time, a stunned Gojo falls into a pool of darkness and Maharaga's demonic hands reach out for him. With nowhere to go, Maharaga grabs Gojo and slices his chest with the sword of extermination, leaving everyone's hope of survival on the brink of death. Beads of sweat drip from everyone's head as they worry about how things could have taken a turn for the worse with Gojo. Since Maharaga has arrived now, it means that he's completely adapted to Gojo's technique. Yuji however stays hopeful, as in his eyes Maharaga only adapted to the infinity, which means it's only an equal fight now, and Gojo can heal up right away using reverse curse technique. Standing nearby and looking absolutely stressed, Shoko explains that she's been smoking a ton during this battle. Sadly, she thinks it isn't just a case of healing up again. Instead, it's more that Gojo's healing is gradually becoming slower than usual due to his extended use of red. If the already prolonged fight continues, it might end up with him not being able to use his curse technique reversal to heal as quickly, therefore he could actually lose. Though, she does pose that that situation is probably the exact same for Sukuna. Gojo's opponent is the King of Curses. Initially when the battle kicked off, everyone thought that it would be impossible for Gojo to win, and now, with what they've seen, that thought is slowly creeping back in. Even Gojo himself has begun thinking the same thing,
already, bro.
Wondering how long it's been since he felt like this. It reminds him of a battle 11 years earlier against Toji Fushiguro, and how now he's beginning to feel the same satisfaction from fighting that's pushing him to an even higher degree throughout this battle. Being the strongest sadly comes with the title of also being the loneliest, and now the only thing that will truly satisfy him. Flying forth, Gojo hits Maharaga with a direct hit that pushes the God Shikigami back. Instantly following up, he tries to activate Red in order to finish him off, but Sukuna jumps back in and uses Megami's Rapid Escape to cover Maharaga and allow him to prepare for the next attack. Having watched his opponent try his best to evade every attack, Gojo mocks Sukuna, asking him how long he's going to rest for after taking the Black Flash, and that it was pretty obvious its effects are still hurting him. Suddenly, Sukuna mixes things up and throws a fire extinguisher to cover himself and make an opening for Maharaga to attack Gojo. As Gojo is caught up in his fight with Big M, Sukuna uses a new application of Megami's Max Elephant Shikigami to shoot a blast of water that mirrors Choso's piercing blood technique. Just as Gojo defends himself against Maharaga, Sukuna's attack lands and wounds his arm. Flying backwards, Gojo realizes that Sukuna is mainly waiting for his infinity ability to vanish, meaning that the fight would eventually turn into a pure 2v1 if it continues. Annoyed, he wonders how Sukuna is even able to use the abilities of the Shikigami without summoning them in the first place. Like, Megami has to go through this whole procedure where Sukuna can wear the wheel and summon the Shikigami with what I'm assuming are just his thoughts here. Gojo knows that since Sukuna was able to adapt to his infinity ability, he's going to have to use more curse energy. That's why he's been simultaneously using the Shikigami. However, he does explain that if Sukuna wants to adapt to Red, it will take much longer to do so. Cutting his brainstorming off though, Sukuna beams his way back into the picture while stating that this isn't a 1v2 numpty, I'm the fraudulent one. Moving his hands together, Sukuna summons a brand new Shikigami called the Chimera Beast Agito, making this previously 2v1 a now 3v1 battle, and putting Gojo even further onto the back foot. According to what I've seen online and everything since the chapter dropped, Chimera Beast is a mixture of Niue and Totality, which is probably a combination that I never actually saw coming and leaves so many other weird and wacky hybrids up for creation in the future. But obviously, moving forward, Gojo himself even jokes that with those two giants standing there, Sukuna looks like a lost child. In a flash, the two beasts start the fight once more, with Gojo just barely being able to dodge the initial attacks. Randomly, and stealing some more of Megami's techniques, Sukuna pops out of Gojo's shadows with his hands aimed like a pistol, and shoots another water blast like piercing blood from Max Elephant's ability, but Gojo dodges that too. Slamming his fists down, Gojo just misses as Sukuna backflips out of the way, allowing his boys to follow up with a dual hook from either side. Somehow dodging each of these large creatures and arriving behind Maharaga, Gojo proceeds to blast him with red, but it's barely even effective enough to burn the creature now. Figuring that man's probably stuffed if he doesn't do something completely insane here, Gojo deduces that he has to use this damn technique in order to be able to finish off Maharaga in one shot. It's a massive risk, as Sukuna will most likely notice the raised output, but it's a risk he's willing to take. With a glimmer of hope and a cheeky grin on his face, Gojo states that he's got no other choice, it's time to use the unlimited holo technique. Gripping his blade tightly, oh my, Why did I start like Anyway, Yuta speaks up and tells the group that he's going to join the battle to help Gojo. Not pleased to hear this, as he stated that he was going to be the first to leave, Kashimo sparks up his cursed energy and warns Yuta to not interfere, as it's him who will go and fight next. Seeing his boy's cursed energy flare up, Hikari asks Yuta to calm down and says Gojo had initially asked them to tag in when he starts to lose the battle or gets overwhelmed. But Yuta rebukes it, saying that since Sukuna's domain expansion is now disabled, he can help Gojo out by handling their 2 Shikagamis with Rika. Speaking up, Maki tells Kashimo to not forget his overall role in this battle. If he's defeated, then some of the backup insurance will be gone. Yuta is just like, but bruh, if we go for it now and take this gamble and win against Sukuna, then the insurance won't be needed at all. Probably just eager to test his new body swapping ability, Yuji takes Yuta's side and encourages him to go for it. I love how like this backup plan of theirs really hasn't even been discussed at all. We kind of skipped over that month as I've been over in the past. Like we know for a fact Kashimo said he's going to be the next to enter, but we have no idea when that's actually going to be at this point. But was this even spoken about beforehand with Gojo? Yuta kind of made it seem like they've all had this chat in the days before this battle, so I'm assuming there is an underlying plan that our team does have. Not just going into this not having any plan at all, but anyways, they all think that because Sukuna isn't able to give us everything, and Gojo is at his best when he doesn't need to worry about others, this setup they're currently in has the highest probability of winning. Getting slightly bummed out with this, both Yuji and Yuta sulk after realizing that they're probably just going to be a hindrance if they enter. Pulling them back to reality though, Kashimo tells them that that's not exactly true. At the end of the day, this is Gojo's fight, and it would just be lame as hell if they all interfered. Kari himself suspects that Sukuna might actually have a trump card and is preserving it for later. So if the sorcerers do act too quickly and reveal their hand, Sukuna might end up using that trap card on them. Skipping away from our guys though, and back inside of Shinjuku, the 2 massive Shikigami attack Gojo in a combination attack. However, Gojo evades the attacks with ease and lands his own counter attack, Black Flash. Jumping back, it's shown that Agito wasn't even phased by the hit and instead sends its tail to attack, which is in fact a miniature version of the Great Serpent, proving that this beast was probably made up of even more Shikigami than originally thought. Ripping off the head of the serpent tail, Gojo watches as Maharaga quickly pushes the other Shikigami aside to protect it as it heals. Pondering on this new beast some more, Gojo thinks that Agito is most likely made up of Nue, which firstly inherited the Great Serpent, then the Morn Tiger and Round Deer. Still, none of that even matters in the larger scheme of things. Since Agito hasn't adapted to Limitless, like Maharaga has, Gojo plans to destroy it in one shot. Stepping away for the second time now, another random reveal that I almost completely missed the first time around. But what even is this Morn Tiger? Surely that's the 10th Shikigami from the 10 Shadows technique that we haven't actually seen yet. The lines across Agito's chest could resemble the tiger's markings. I initially thought it was something to do with Sukuna. Love to know what you guys all think, and if we'll ever actually get an explanation on the Shikigami in the future. Placing his blade on the floor, Maharaga flicks it at Gojo, causing a line of rubble to get thrown up into his face.
Narrating,
locking the
it's a
rocks with his
W
infinity,
video, bro.
Gojo then proceeds to dodge out of
is
the way
crazy.
of the Shikigami's follow-up attack. Continuing, Dad then launches a fat head kick that pushes the creature back. Turning around, Gojo quickly activates his infinity and brings the second Shikigami in closer. Having seen Agito use RCT to heal its tail before, Gojo realizes that it'll be troublesome if it also heals Sukuna during the battle, so his plan is to firstly deal with it. Elsewhere, inside of his dank, shadowy world, Sukuna starts creating a plan to not let Gojo use his prolific Hollow Purple. He knows that the last time Gojo used it, the attack was amped up to 120%. Still, he was able to take it head on with somewhat minimal damage, since it was coming from such a large distance. However, due to everything that's happened since then, if Dad does hit him with even a 100% Hollow Purple right now, then it will be fatal. Knowing that Maharaga wasn't showing him everything, Sukuna speaks up and asks his Shikigami how long it's going to make him wait. He's not dumb and knows it's no longer Megami's shadow, so demands that it shows him what it's got. Following those orders, Maharaga's wheel spins and sends forth an ability that looks exactly like Sukuna's Dismantle, which slices the greatest sorcerer of today's arm right off. Not leaving the shadowy realm, Sukuna chuckles and praises Maharaga for its adept use of his technique, while simultaneously, a bunch of the sorcerers all scream in pure panic. Shoko personally knows that this isn't great timing at all, as Gojo's healing is currently weakened. Re-emerging from his shadows and taking the advantage, Sukuna punches Gojo before quickly following
Bitch ass, nigga. Now he wanna come out his shadow. Now he wanna come out his shadow.
Who'd begun flaring up its own cursed energy. Agito then proceeds
Smart
to
man, but he's a
pummel
bitch.
Gojo's head with a fat right hook. However, Gojo, looking completely manic, looks into its eyes while creating an orb of condensed blue and tells Agito that for a while now it wasn't worthy enough to be considered an opponent in this battle.
Looks so,
Smashing
like,
his left hand down now,
crazy.
Gojo effortlessly thrashes around the pathetic curse.
Damn.
Looking at Sukuna and Maharaga, he cements Agito's uselessness as he captures it completely within his new, blue, maximum output and sends a pathetic creature hurling towards Sukuna and Maharaga. Dodging out of the way of the blast, Sukuna can only watch as the amalgamation of Shikagamis is sent hurling through Shinjuku before it is eventually crushed and destroyed under the pure force of Gojo's maximum output technique. 41 seconds later, Gojo's purple has also ripped its way through the battlefield in Shinjuku.
Gods envy us. They envy us because we're mortal. Any moment might be our last. Everything's more beautiful because we're doomed.
So
In
this is gonna
history,
be
there can only ever be
cra-
one.
They're gonna make
The
this
moniker
movie.
of
It's
the
gonna be a movie,
strongest
chat. I'm
is
telling
something
you.
passed down from titan to titan.
gonna be a movie, bro.
Something only a very talented and blessed individual is capable of achieving. Hard work and determination means nothing if the basis
That's
of
what it
how
kinda
you build
remind me
your
of, like,
strength
Spirit
is
Bomb.
shaky to begin with. Luckily for Satoru Gojo, his infinite potential is built upon a ground far stronger than that of a stolen child's corpse. Having completely annihilated Agito, who he didn't see as fit to belong in his presence, it is said that with Gojo having also landed a second Black Flash, his intensity increased, and as he felt a rush of exhilaration flow through him, he activated his reverse curse technique, allowing him to
Correct.
comfortably heal that previously failed arm. On the other hand, and for the first time in 1,000 years, the King of Curses, Ryomen Sukuna, finally begins to feel the weight of battle. Reigniting the fight,
You're
Gojo stuns
scared.
everyone as he lands his third Black Flash, but this time on Maharaga. Darting back, he then takes Sukuna by surprise as he appears directly in front of him. Sukuna tries to throw a fat right hook, but Gojo comfortably dodges it and grabs the King of Curses' hand before adjusting his polarity and throwing him into Mummy Maharaga. Not
Mummy
giving him a
Maharaga.
moment to relax as well, Gojo follows up with his fourth Black Flash. Luckily for Sukuna, Maharaga was able to block the strike with a Sword of Extermination. Still, the impact from Gojo's punch smashed the wall behind them and sent them sliding back through one floor of an office building. Floating outside that said office building, Gojo raises his hand and begins chanting in preparation for his next technique. Phase, preparation, pillars of light. In Jujutsu, a spark is the curse energy that swells up inside a sorcerer just before they go and activate a technique. In the moments before a domain activation, sure hit technique, and other powerful abilities, there will be, without exception, a spark. Even the great Gojo with his immense curse energy isn't an exception to this rule. This fact doesn't change. Instead, it's all the more obvious for his hollow technique, purple. Inside of the building, and based on the incantations that were said by Gojo, along with the scale of curse energy put into those said incantations, Sukuna believes that the spark currently before his eyes was that of the curse technique reversal, red. So, what Sukuna's plans are in preparation for the attack is to have Maharaga tank it, then on top of that adapt to red to put Gojo in his place. However, Sukuna's judgment on this next attack was by no means incorrect. Activating Curse Technique Reversal, red, Gojo blasts his ability straight upwards into the sky, completely confusing Sukuna as he obviously thought he was going to shoot it at him.
Starting to
After a
realize.
second thought though, he quickly comes to realize the magnitude of what's happening and calls forth Maharaga. Blasting up through the levels of the building, Maharaga shatters each window as the speed of his movement increases in an attempt to catch Gojo's red. Moments after red was fired, Sukuna figured that by merging the lapse of blue and the reversal of red, Hollow Technique Purple is formed, producing an imaginary mass that rushes forth. Shooting itself outside of the building now, it's shown that just ahead of Maharaga, the red Gojo had previously fired was headed directly at the perpetuated technique that had crushed Agito earlier, blue. In a general sense, the technique, red, falls into a standstill before it will explode. Sukuna was able to figure this out because of the ability Gojo used on him last time, you know, when he gave him the fat back shots. Maharaga was sent up by him to prevent the abilities from merging. Firstly, what Sukuna had planned for the Shikigami to do was to attack blue and completely erase it as it had already adapted to blue beforehand. All that ran through the beast's mind as it tried to do this was a yearning to fulfill orders. Traveling up at a rapid speed though, and using the attractive force of his own blue, Satoru Gojo flung himself between his blue and Maharaga. Blue chooses its targets without bias, and because its attraction isn't affecting the adapted Maharaga, as a side effect, it causes his adaptation to actually backfire. Lunging forth, Gojo lands a fat uppercut on the Shikigami that leaves Sukuna with no one to defend him as he prepares his own last-ditch attack. Pulling up his hand to perform another use of his piercing blood-like ability, Sukuna plans to disrupt the merging by causing the explosion of red first before it can merge. Shooting off his ability, Gojo quickly follows up and punches the King of Curses in his side. Looking up and seeing that his ability was able to shoot forth and that it was about to clash with Gojo's, Sukuna confidently remarked that he was too slow. Unfazed by this all, Gojo quickly rattles off the incarnation for Blue, Phase, Twilight, Eyes of Pranja in such a short period of time that it utterly stuns Sukuna. Glancing at his attack again, he watches as it pierces into Gojo's steadily merging technique, not affecting it in the slightest. The reason that it didn't actually disrupt Red right there is because Gojo, in those last milliseconds before the technique was about to hit, reactivated and restored his output following the incarnations that he just previously said. Which is actually insane when you think about it. I don't even know how man did that. Anyway, floating there with both foes on each side of him, Gojo starts his incantations for the legendary Hollow technique, Purple. 9 ropes, polarized light, Crow and Shomyo, the gap between within and without. Witnessing the battle of the century back at the TV room, Yuta apologizes to Kusakabe for what he had said previously. As to him, it's pretty obvious that if a burden such as himself entered the battle, then Gojo wouldn't have been able to do this. With both colors fully combining and the purple light of the gods themselves getting ever brighter, Gojo looks upon both of his terrified opponents' faces and finishes the incantation. Purple. Instantly, following the implosion of the two techniques, an imaginary force of unstoppable curse energy exploded outwards, destroying Maharaga along with anything in its path and completely burying all of Shinjuku under a carpeted layer of rebar and rubble. Barefoot and barely able to stand now, Sukuna, having survived the blast, holds himself up against a broken wall.
Explain how you survived that.
Gojo states that, well, this was an unlimited purple, not bound by any specific target, so it even damaged him. However, as we can see, it's obvious that there's a difference in the level of their damage. Gojo assumes that it's just because his curse energy pool is just that large. So in the end, all's well that ends well in his eyes. He even jokes that he totally crushed Sukuna in the improvisation department with that use of remote purple, and that is the first time he's ever had to actually blow himself up and then repair himself, which again is mental. How do you even do that? I know you can already see, but as long as you keep that part of the brain there. So I'm imagining right now Gojo blew his entire body up apart from that one section of the brain and then completely re-healed his body. I don't know, man, that's actually insane when you think about it. If you're confused like I kind of am right here and how in the world Gojo was able to start using curse energy again, well, it's like Kusakabe says here, and how we all learned earlier on back in the series when our boy Yuji landed 4 of them. Gojo was able to regain his reverse curse technique because of his use of black flashes. So, miracles happen when people start landing these black flashes pretty much, they reach their true potential and stuff. So now, with Sukuna, who has slowed healing, no Maharaga, and an inability to do any more damage, it means that for sure, 100% Gojo wins the battle of the strongest sorcerer in the history of the Jujutsu Kaisen universe. Suddenly, it all goes dark. Breaking through the unsettling quiet, Geto yells out to a familiar someone, saying yo. Looking up with a stupefied look on his face, Gojo groans, confused with his current predicament. Leaning back in his chair, Gojo tells his man that this is probably the worst he could have got. Hearing this, Geto moans, obviously not happy with his best mate's initial reaction to seeing him again before telling him that he's been a bit rude. Kind of annoyed, Gojo says he told his students that when you die, that's it, you are alone. So he hopes this is all just a part of his current imagination. Unconcerned even if it is, Geto asks why it even matters to him, but Gojo replies that it does matter because of his father. However, he also realizes that things are all set up for Shoko to handle either way, so it's actually okay. Curious on what the battle was like, Geto asked how strong the King of Curses was. Remembering the tough fought battle, Gojo answers that Sukuna was damn strong and he didn't even go all out for the win. In fact, he's not even sure he could have won even if Sukuna didn't have Megami's curse technique, meaning that even without Maharaga, Sukuna would have somehow won. Blown away with this information, Geto was surprised that Sukuna made Gojo of all people admit that he was truly weaker and feels sorry for him. Gojo says that he used to think that him, more than anyone else, would be able to empathize with Sukuna about the loneliness of being the strongest. However, he still loved everyone and wasn't ever truly feeling loneliness. Somewhere along the way though, a line was drawn between himself and other people, or rather, living beings. He notes that you can grow and love flowers over time, but what he rather wanted from it was for those flowers to understand him. Not gonna lie, that's actually one beautiful analogy for Gojo wanting all of the young ones that he's teaching to see him and how he does it so they can learn themselves, then grow from it. Anyways, clutching his fist in desperation, Gojo says that he gave his everything to try and win. His trained body, the techniques he learned throughout life, the talent he brushed upon others, inspiration and unparalleled explosive powers. He says he wanted all of him to reach Sukuna and hopes that he somewhat left an impact on the King of Curses. Absolute strength, the loneliness that comes from it. Gojo believes that truly, someday, someone will teach him to love. Calms down now, and with a bit of a grin on his face, he just states that, in the end, the battle was fun for him though. He just mainly feels sorry for Sukuna because he wasn't able to feel the same feeling and give his all to Gojo. Looking at his best mate now, Suguru says that
it is kind of crazy because
Sukuna
was not going all well.
But if Gojo is truly satisfied with it, then he's also on the same page as him. Satisfaction. With only one thing missing
he had enough
in
power
his
to,
eyes,
he had enough
Gojo
power
told
to
him
go
that he would have loved if Geto was also there to give him a slap
his
on the
hammer arrow
back
for
and
him.
motivate him along with everyone else before battle. Maybe then he could have truly been satisfied in the end. Either way, and pushing that thought aside, he says that he's glad what killed him in the end wasn't time or disease, but someone stronger than him. Grossed out with that level of strength though, Nanami perks up and asks Gojo which samurai general he currently is. Sitting on the airport chair behind him, Nanami continues that what Gojo was just saying is something that no one in the modern age would ever say, and guesses that it's also why he was able to live longer than him in the end. Speaking up and making his short re-entrance into the story as well, Yu Hayabara says that the timing was just a tad different for the big man and Nanami, obviously referring to their deaths and stuff, so like Nanami died in Shibuya and then only a couple months later Gojo was passed away, so he's saying their timing wasn't too different. Anyways, while telling Gojo to stop roughing up his hair, Nanami, my dad, says he once talked with Geto about leaving all of the work at Jujutsu Tech to Gojo. In the end though, he returned because he knew Gojo didn't consider Jujutsu as something to live for or to protect. Rather, he knew that Gojo was mentally perverted and only used sorcery to satisfy himself. Hayabara, looking happy as always, adds that it's something everyone noticed, but didn't exactly have the courage to say out loud. Curiously, as obviously we don't even know what happened, Nanami says he won't justify Gojo's last moments, but instead feels sympathy for him, to which Gojo thanks Nanami for it. Curious himself, he also asks what it was like for Nanami, but Yu jumps in revealing that man actually made his own appearance during Nanami's passing. Nanami also drops another bomb revolving around sorcery, as according to him, curses sometimes even help keep people alive. In regards to Gojo's question, Nanami answers that he had once asked Mei-san about where to head in the afterlife, and she suggested to either move north if you were looking for a new side of yourself.
Like, I'm not mad at Gojo. It's fair. It's a fair fight.
You are. I think it's fairly evident.
Gojo was strong as shit. Like we've seen that 3v1 was barely needed.
This also finally lets us know that it's a bit more straightforward if someone does actually.
So I'm not mad at Sukuna. He was doing the right, but he was holding back. Low key, he didn't even use his full power because he knew he had to fight other people after Gojo.
When they do go back to it. Anyways, back to the sadness. Obviously, and I never expected any otherwise from my dad, Nanami says he chose South without any doubt when the time came, but for a moment, even gambled on a better future. His last moments in his eyes weren't bad at all though, thanks to his best mate making his reappearance and telling him what way to go. Lastly, and screaming out at the big Masamichi Yaga, who instantly covers his ears to protect himself, Gojo jokingly mocks him for saying earlier in life that there wasn't any death without regrets as a sorcerer, obviously meaning that man probably doesn't have any regrets right now. Looking around at everyone else gathered with him inside of the airport, Nanami, Yu, Misato, who Toji must have sadly also killed, plus, you know, there is that little ghostly figure in the back that might actually be Toji, if so that is hilarious. Riko as well, who's there chilling with Misato, and finally, his best mate, Suguru. Gojo then also cracks his best smile yet and hopes to God that this isn't a dream. In reality, Gojo, who was just deemed the strongest sorcerer in Jujutsu Kaisen history, is shown to be in half and no longer capable of breathing. With his eyes' movement stopping and the beat of his heart ceasing, Satoru Gojo loses. And rest in peace, big man. It had to happen at some point,
bruh.
but thank you, Giga. It was absolutely amazing the way it did happen. As dust particles then fall from above, blanketing the entire battlefield, Sukuna, the King of Curses, explains what truly happened under Maharaga's adaptation. Once Maharaga receives an attack from someone, it'll gradually adapt to it over time. As we saw with Gojo's technique, some took more spins than others, but the more attacks Maharaga takes, the faster it'll adapt to that set ability. Even after it adapts, it will further analyze the technique and continue to do even more adaptations. Sukuna says he expected Maharaga to be an example to him, an example which passed through Gojo's infinity and showed him how to do it
I know
himself.
their hearts
Throughout
dropped
the
when
battle,
he died,
Maharaga
bro.
was first adapting to Gojo's infinity, then it would change its own curse energy over time so that it could neutralize Gojo's infinity. The second time Maharaga adapted was exactly what he expected. It wasn't the same as Sukuna's slash technique, instead it expanded the target for the curse technique. More specifically, expanded the target of the slash to not just Gojo, but the space, the world, and then cut it. In front of Sukuna now, it's evident that there is no physical way Gojo is going to be able to recover, as he has been completely disembodied by Sukuna's technique, slash. Sukuna explains that infinity doesn't matter as a technique. If the world exists, the world will be divided. It doesn't matter if Gojo or even his infinity exists, they will be sliced. Sukuna notes that it was difficult for him to pull off, but a great example for him to work on. Bringing Gojo's wish to fruition, Sukuna, with a fat smile on his face, then thanks him for the magnificent battle, while saying that he will never ever forget about him. Turning and seeing someone approaching him at a high speed now, Sukuna tells them that he better not let him down. Flashing into the sky, we see that without any time for anyone to mourn or feel sorry for Gojo's
this is gonna
death,
be crazy
the
too,
one
bro.
that came in to take his place against the King of Curses was no one other than the Thunder God, Hajime Kashimo. And what an amazing fight that was. All the cope I've seen from Gojo fans since the spoilers dropped is actually honorable, but I don't see any way or any possible universe of him even getting back up anytime soon. I'm curious as to how far Sukuna will be able to take his technique and what he will do with Gojo, possibly take his own body in the future. That would be extremely interesting. I highly doubt it, but I do truly feel bad for Shoko and Ajichi now, as they are the only two from Gojo's time in school to still be around. I hope they make it through somehow throughout the rest of the story, but who knows at the moment. I love this freaking battle, man, and I think it was fairly obvious that from day one, Gojo was most likely going to lose this just for the narrative. We need our goats, Yuji and Yuta,
I seen it coming too, bro.
and being the ones
He was the
to finish
strongest
it,
character in
not
the show, and
their
he's a
teacher.
side
It's
character
time
at
to let
that. He
them
was a
shine, and I
side
can't wait
character,
to see
chat.
them start growing in
He was
actual
a side
strength.
character.
Yuji might finally get his own technique.
He had
Who
to
knows?
go,
Anyways,
bro.
if you guys have enjoyed the video,
He had to
see
go.
a bunch of stuff just like this, but for a variety of different series, do remember to subscribe.
He had to go, chat. And without further ado, like and subscribe, comment what you would like below. Without further ado, Bright out, man.